All right, so in the last video, we showed you how to set everything up. So you have your laying flock and your feed and egg carton pricing and all that stuff in there. So everything is set to go for your daily logs. Now, whenever you start logging, your log sheets are going to be these tabs that say the years 2020, 2023, 2024, 2025, or whatever the years are that you're using this for. So whenever you come in here and you want to add an entry in, you will come in on the specific day, but on March 20th, for example. Anything that has a green header is something that you can edit. If it has a brown header, that means you don't touch it. It's a formula, or it's pulling information from elsewhere. Pretending today was March 20th, 2023. We can see here that our feed target is 22.5 pounds. But we're going to put in this column here what we actually fed. So on this day, we actually fed 20.5 pounds. Even though it was recommended that we feed 22.5, we only fed 20.5 for whatever the reasons may be. So on this day, we fed 20.5 pounds. And then the next column over, you're going to choose what feed you used. So this drop-down menu is actually pulling from our global data page and the layer feeds that we had here. So again, if we have a new layer feed, let's say in July there was a new price for layer. Perhaps they changed the pricing. So it's still the layer 16%, still the same stuff we always use, but the price came down a little bit. Maybe it's 51 cents now per pound. So I can put that in there. And now when we go back to our log sheet, we can see it now has that option here. If we choose that, it adjusts the cost based on what that price per pound is. So if you need to add in different pricing for the layers, you do that on your global data sheet. And then this drop-down menu, you'll choose which one you want. The next column over is your feed cost. So this is calculating if we fed 20.5 pounds of this feed, this is how much it costs for feed for that day. The next column over is calculating the feed per dozen of eggs. So this is how much feed does it take to make 1 dozen eggs. And then again, the feed cost per dozen. So that's how much feed cost goes into 1 dozen of eggs. And then your percent feed to target is how much you actually fed versus the target amount that was recommended. So we can see we fed slightly under that. Again, these columns are not ones you would edit. You're just going to be editing the ones in the green. So next up is the quantity of eggs collected. So for that day, you would type in here however many eggs you collected that day. If you had any crack eggs, you would enter them there, or any eggs that broke or whatever, you would enter them there. Then this will automatically calculate how many dozens of eggs you have. So 50 eggs would give us slightly over 4 dozen. For losses, this would only be if you had a chicken die, you would then record it. So the way your losses work here is you'll type in your loss, like however many chickens died. And if it's just, 1 or whatever, you can type 1 there. And then the loss category would be your reason for death. Again, that is pulling off your global data, off of your loss categories right here. So you can add in other ones and customize that to your liking. But if you had, for illness, you can choose which breed it was that died. Now, if we have a Buff Orpington that died, we can then choose, was it the younger one or was it the older one? And then by choosing the hatch date here, this will uniquely identify if you have multiple breeds of different ages. It'll uniquely identify which chicken actually died. So we can see if we have, the Buff Orpington that was on 9/13/22, for example, and we lost that one, we lost one of them. We can go back to our global data here, and we can see our Buff Orpington right here. We can see there was a loss, and we have 14 of them remaining. And you can see it was pulling off of the one that is the hatch date of 9/13. not the Buff Orpington that was on 4/1. So moving over next, we go into financial end of things. In this item, if you have an expense other than feed or egg cartons, you would put that expense in here if there are any. This would be things like bedding or any supplies you want to track or anything like that. So whatever expense items you want to track there, you can just choose what it is and then enter in a price here. The next column is your total cost to date. Now that is adding up everything. That's the feed cost, your egg carton cost, and also any expense items to this date. Now moving over, we have our egg cartons used. Again, this egg carton here is pulling from your global data page, much like the feed works. You'll have a list here. So if prices change or whatever, you can add another one in here, add the new cost, and then whenever you go to log your information, it will show up in this list. And your new pricing and everything will be calculated based off of your choice that you choose there. This is just taking all the expenses for just this day only and dividing it amongst however many dozen of eggs you got. So it's showing you the cost per dozen for just that day only. Your profit per dozen, just like the cost per dozen, only it's profits and it's for that day only. So this may go up or down depending on the day. From there, we move into weather information. I will show you in a separate video how to get this weather information in here. This is not something you need to edit all the time. And it'll bring in the high temperature for the day, the low temperature, any rainfall, and any snowfall. This rain times 100 and snow times 100 is literally just these rain and snowfall numbers multiplied by 100. The only reason we do that is so on graphs, we can actually see them better visually represented when we match them up against the number of eggs we collected or dozens of eggs or something like that, because we're comparing some very small numbers here to very large numbers. So we want to kind of even out the graph so it's more readable. Moving on from there, you have a section for notes. So if you need to take any notes for a day, you can write in any notes you need there. Next over is your location. So this would be different locations you can choose. So wherever your chickens are that day, you can put in there. This is for people who have multiple locations or who move their chickens around to different pastures, or, if you have like a winter greenhouse or whatever, you can mark the location they're in, and this will track productivity based on the location that they're at. Next up is food scraps and compost. So if you gave them food scraps for a day, you would simply just check that box. If you gave them access to compost, you would check that box. And by logging this information, it will allow you to see productivity based on if your chickens were given food scraps and compost and how that compares to the days that they weren't given food scraps and compost. So again, on this sheet, it looks like a whole lot of information here, which it is, but it really should only take you a few seconds every day. Really, you're just going to be doing your total feed amount, put how much feed you fed, what feed you used, and then how many eggs you collected and any cracked eggs. And then over here, you'll want to log your egg cartons used and location and if food scraps or compost is given. So all that should just take a few seconds to log every day. Your losses and expenses, you typically won't have every day. That's usually just a here and there type of thing. So whenever you do have them, you can log that information. But otherwise, you can just leave that stuff go. So that's it for this video. The next video in the series, I'm going to be showing you how to pull in weather information into this sheet and match that up against the productivity of your egg laying hens. So I'll see you in the next video.